Two conferences have the week off this week, and so it's going to be a bit of an abbreviated schedule here in the NAIA. We're going to talk about that tonight here on Midwest Sportsnet. Thanks for stopping by the channel. Appreciate getting to see all of you that are here, and please let me know from where you are watching, especially if you're watching us live tonight. Let us know from where you're watching. It's a big week, so let's go ahead and get started with where we need to start, and that is, well, it's by putting that right there on the bottom of the screen. The NAIA F-ball poll, of which Midwest Sportsnet gets to have a vote each and every week. So it's a little bit different than the rankings, not rating, that you get from the NAIA, but pretty close. It's a media poll. And so you can check that out on the bottom of the screen as we go all the way through our evening tonight. And we'll go ahead and get started, not with that. How about with this? There we go. First matchup that we have on topic tonight is Bluefield at Point. That's where we'll get things underway tonight. Bluefield 3-2 on the year, Point 2-3 on the year. Bluefield defeated St. Andrews last week 49-14, and Point defeated Kentucky Christian, which pretty much has happened all season long. 35-0, blank the Knights there. Point leads this series all-time 5-3. And didn't win. Bluefield won 20-14 last year. Bluefield led by Nate Hurstich, who's throwing at a clip of 320.2 yards per game. That's tops in the NAIA. One of the reasons, though, that Bluefield might be 3-2 is the fact that the Rams are giving up 280.2 passing yards per game there. And so that's how that one works out. Bluefield needing to pick up things on defense. We'll have an opportunity this week on the road at Point. Next up, we look at, and we're doing two things on one computer tonight, so it's a little bit different. Ave Maria, 2-2 on the year, taking on Thomas, 0-3. And Thomas and Ave Maria meeting for the first time ever. Of course, that's what we said. We're going to be talking about Thomas all season long. Every meeting is going to be the first meeting ever. Thomas yet to pick up that elusive first win, trying to do so at home against Ave Maria. Ave Maria, the Gyrenes fell to Florida Memorial last week, 56-13. Thomas lost to Kaiser 44-12. But here's the deal. Brian Steinke for Ave Maria now is leading the country in rushing yards. Had 5 touchdowns a couple of weeks ago, just 2 this past week. 3 games worth of work. He's picking up 141 yards per contest. And again, that is tops in the NAI. So we've had a couple of NAI leaders in our first 2 games. Hey, thanks, Alexander, for watching tonight from Park City, Utah. I don't know of any NAI teams out there in Utah, but a Marion Knights alum. So let's go ahead and let's drop that. We need to put that up there. Thanks, Alexander. And Knights, we'll talk about them here in just a moment as we get to the next one on the list. Knights are coming up after that. Warner, 3-1. Florida Memorial, 2-2. Warner lost to Southeastern last weekend, 54-9. And Florida Memorial defeated Ave Maria. We talked about that, 56-13. Florida Memorial is 2-1 all-time in this series, won by forfeit last season. So let's move on through then. I said I'd get to Marion. How about this? We'll get to Marion right now. Marion, 4-0 on the season. Madonna, 0-5 on the season. We've been talking about picking our games by way of the trend. We'll just go ahead and go all the way through it tonight. We won't save it till the end because there are only about 32 games on tap this week. Here's the trend. Marion hasn't lost yet this year. Madonna hasn't won yet this year. Marion, 2-0 all-time in this series, has won 86-0 in 2022, 80-3 in 2021. The trend says go with Marion. And we're going to say go with the trend, although I'm sure that Vegas doesn't have any odds on this game in particular. But if they did, I would take Marion, and I would take any amount of points that they put up with that. Shout out to Jake tonight, who is watching, I know, from East Wichita tonight. And the KCAC's on a bye week this week. And so is the Hart Conference as well. We'll talk about both of those a little bit later on. But friends, not going to be on tap for Jake to watch this week. So yeah, watch some other conferences in all of that. Moving on through, we said take Marion and take any amount of points that they give you on that. The next one on the list tonight, Siena Heights, 2-2 on the year. St. Francis of Indiana, 2-2 on the year. St. Francis 6-4 all time in this series, but Siena Heights has won 3 straight coming in, including a 13-10 victory last season. Siena Heights lost to Indiana Wesleyan, as every team that's played Indiana Wesleyan so far this year has, 48-12. Siena Heights lost last week. St. Francis beat Madonna, as every team that's played Madonna this year has, 44-9. So both of those teams 2-2. Siena Heights bringing some momentum in the series, at least, into this game on Saturday. Judson 0-4. St. Xavier 3-2. St. Xavier is 2-0 all time in this series, won 52-6 last year. Judson lost to Olivet Nazarene 58-14. Judson is the only team in the NAIA that is giving up more than 500 yards per game. So you can see how the Eagles right now would be 0-4 on the season. 532 yards of total offense given up each week, and that is over 4 games, 532 yards a game. That is really something. The Cougars defeated St. Francis of Illinois last week, 28-21, the final in overtime. St. Xavier, by the way, now 25-1 all time in that series. That's just incredible. The Cougar defense has collected 19 sacks on the year, so it's a defensive effort. That's second in the NAIA. Next on the docket for Saturday, Central Methodist taking on Olivet Nazarene. The Eagles 1-4 on the year. This is the first ever meeting between Central Methodist and Olivet Nazarene. And by the way, this gives us that segue into conferences taking the week off. KCAC and Hart both taking the week off. Each conference has 12 teams broken up into 2 divisions. And so they played their crossover play through the first 6 weeks, well, week 0 through week 5. And then this is a bye week for the conference as a whole. But Central Methodist is getting in a game anyway around. 1-4 on the year. Out of conference, are taking on the Tigers from the Mid-States Football Association, the Midwest Division. Again, first ever meeting between these two. Central Methodist lost to Grandview last week, 65-0. And by the way, Grandview is absolutely on a tear. A couple of humongous wins. Sorry, there's no T on the end of that word. 65-point victory last week, 63-point victory the week before that. And the Vikings, they just need to take some time, take a breather for a moment, and see how badly they're going to take on and take out their next opponent. Olivet Nazarene defeated Judson last week, 58-14. Blake Lamb, the offensive player of the week in the Midwest, in the Mid-States Football Association. He had 5 catches for 111 yards, 3 touchdowns. And Mike Conway, since he's stepped out of the active athletic director role to fill the role of football coach, which opened up late in the summer, he stepped in, and Olivet Nazarene 3-2 on the season since he has come into that position. Well, returned to that position, I guess the best way to say that. Pikeville 3-2. Reinhardt 2-2. Now Reinhardt is 5-0 all time in this series. Reinhardt was 4-0 all time in the series against Georgetown last week. And Georgetown came in with momentum, but Reinhardt stayed undefeated in that series, 5-0 now, and they're taking on Pikeville. Pikeville 3-2 on the year, coming in with momentum. Defeated Union last week, 52-10. Who are you going to take in this one? I'm not going to go against Reinhardt again. I'm sorry. I'm just not, especially if they're undefeated in the series. So Reinhardt 5-0 all time, won 20-7, and this was back in 2019, the last time these two teams met. Reinhardt with 5 consecutive wins in the series. I would say stay with the trend in this one. If you were going to bet, which we're not, but if you were, then stay with the trend. Reinhardt, Jordavian Colbert, 111.3 rushing yards per game. That is good enough for 8th in the NAIA. St. Andrews, 0-5. Union has a win this year, but it didn't come last week. Union, we mentioned, lost to Pikeville last week, 52-10. St. Andrews lost to Bluefield, 49-14. St. Andrews is 4-1 all time in this series, won 27-26 last year. And St. Andrews has winning records over only 3 schools in program's history. Union, 4-1 all time. But Cincinnati Christian and Edward Waters are no longer in the NAI. Cincinnati Christian, as a matter of fact, St. Andrews has defeated Cincinnati Christian 2-0 all time. no longer a school or a program there. Edward Waters now is in Division II. So win or lose this weekend, St. Andrews will still have a winning record over 3 schools all time because, you can't win 3 games all at once. So 4-1 all time. Union comes in with a win, but you have to think the Knights, they're going to pick up a win at some point in time this season. I think I would stay with the St. Andrews winning record on this one, and won by only 1 against Union last year. I don't know. This one's in Union. We'll find out. Southeastern on the road, taking on Weber International. Southeastern 2-2 on the year. Weber International 1-3 on the year. The Fire 7-2 all time in this series. But Weber International won 34-24 last season. Southeastern defeated Warner last week 54-9. And the defense is giving up only 232.3 yards of total offense per game. And that is good enough for second in the NAIA. Weber International is going to have to try to move the ball. And I don't know how the Warriors are going to do it. The Warriors lost last week to St. Thomas, 41-16. Shout out to everyone watching tonight here as we're midway through our, well, not quite to the midpoint, but we're midway through our broadcast tonight, and want to say thanks to everyone for watching. Please let us know from where you're watching tonight. We have Utah, we have Kansas on the board. Let us know. Oh, and by the way, we are now, the Midwest Sportsnet channel has been accepted in the YouTube partner program. So we're able to offer a few things along the way, including memberships as we go along. So just wanted to give a shout out right now, but let us know from where you're watching tonight. All right, moving on through Georgetown, 2-1 on the year on the road, and it's going to be a very, very tough place to win in McKenzie. Bethel, 5-0 on the year. Now, Georgetown comes in with a 12-4 record all time in this series, but Bethel's won the last 2, and that includes a 24-14 victory last year. Bethel has won a number of regular season contests in a row. I believe they are now at 16? Yeah, 16. No, 17 now. 17 consecutive regular season games in a row Bethel has won. Georgetown lost to Reinhardt last week, 28-24. Bethel defeated Cumberland's last week, 30-27. But these are 2 of the highest scoring teams in the NAIA. Bethel comes in putting up 52.2 points per game. That leads the NAIA. Georgetown comes in putting up 42 points per game. That is 7th in the NAIA. But it's not just about that. It's also about the defenses that these 2 teams are fielding this year. Bethel is giving up only 9 points per game. That is 2nd in the NAIA. Georgetown is giving up only 14 points per game. That is 6th in the NAIA. Bethel also collected 20 sacks through their first 5 games this season. That's at the top of the list in the NAIA as well. So you're talking about 2 very, very good offenses. You're talking about 2 very, very good defenses. This is probably, well, it's top 5 of all the matchups that are going on this week. I won't give it the top billing just yet, but it is top 5 of all the matchups this week. Georgetown on the road at Bethel. Who would we take here? Well, the all-time series favors Georgetown 12-4. Bethel's come in having won 2 in a row in this series, and Bethel with 17 consecutive games, regular season games, having won. I say we go with the trend in this one. We're going to pick Bethel in the victory over Georgetown. No points given in this, not like, Vegas is giving points on that. Hey, shout out to Dale. Thank you for watching tonight. Appreciate that. From Sioux Falls, and I'm telling you, Dale, that is on the list. It really is. Midwest Sports Saturday is going to do a show in Sioux Falls one of these times. I'm looking forward to that. Roll Stangs. We'll talk about the Stangs just a little bit more as we go on through right now. Let's continue on as I have it in the order that it is, and it is Valley City State 3-2. On the road at Waldorf, 3-2. The Vikings, 10-3 all time, and have won 5 straight in this series. That includes 35-14 back in 2022. Valley City State lost to Dickinson State in its last game, 34-10. Waldorf lost to Dickinson State in its last game, 41-14. Well, and there are bye weeks in between, so that's how 2 teams can play the same team in its last contest. Waldorf, though, led by Jatovier Hill, and he continues to run the ball very, very well. 116 yards per game, fifth in the NAIA. He has 10 rushing touchdowns. That's tied for second in the NAIA. This is a big North Star matchup, and you have to think Valley City State would like to give Waldorf maybe a parting love gift like Dickinson State did a couple of weeks ago in saying goodbye to the North Star Conference. Waldorf is heading out of the North Star and making its way into the GPAC, but that's another season away. Speaking of the GPAC, let's talk about Midland and let's talk about Dordt right now. Dordt remains undefeated. And if you saw on the crawl there, according to the NAIA F-ball poll, Dordt is a top 10 team, and why not? Has done a fantastic job this season. Midland's 3-3, but Midland came to the point of the schedule where it just got to be a little bit more difficult. Midland was 3-0 to open the season, and then took on Dakota Wesleyan, who's 5-1 now, Morningside, who's 5-0 and just dominates, and Northwestern, who's also 5-0 and of late has been dominating as well. So Midland hit that really, really tough portion of the schedule, and I don't think the Warriors are out of that tough portion of the schedule either, because look at what Dordt has done this season. Scoring 49.25 points per game. That is second in the NAIA. 474.4 yards per game of total offense. That's fifth in the NAIA, but the defense has stood up for the defenders as well, as that's the appropriately named defenders there. 13.8 points per game. That's all Dordt's given up. That is fourth in the NAIA. And not only that, well, they're tops in another category. I thought this was nice. The only team in the country that's 100% on fourth down. They're 2 for 2. They had to go for it only twice. But when you do everything else well, you're not going to have to go for too many fourths down. But they did. 26.8 first downs per game as well. That's fourth in the NAIA. Dordt defeated Hastings last week, 61-21. Midland lost to Northwestern, 42-21. I'd have to say Midland is not out of that tough part of the schedule yet. And if we were to pick one, we would have to go ahead and pick Dordt in this one to remain undefeated. Shout out Football 45, go LCU. And now is that Louisiana Christian? Because we're going to talk about the Wildcats a little bit later on. So give a shout out right there. Continue to give a shout out, I guess. We move laterally. We're going to stay in conference right here. Doane, 0-6. Briarcliff. I've been wanting to put the T on the end of words. I know what that is. Doane 0-6. Briarcliff 1-4. And as we stay in the GPAC here, Doane 15-3 all time in the series. Won 3 straight, including 28-14, a win over Briarcliff in the 2022 season finale. Doane lost to Morningside last week. Who doesn't lose to Morningside in the regular season? Everyone loses to Morningside in the regular season. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. 38-7, the score last week. Doane has lost 10 of its last 11. Briarcliff lost to Concordia last week, 32-25. Doane has won 15 of 18 in this series, including 3 straight. We're going to say they're going to win 4 straight in the series. Doane picks up its first win of the season on the road in Sioux City. And that's just our pick right here on the show. So, yeah, 45, Football 45, it is Louisiana Christian. We're going to talk about Louisiana Christian a little bit later on. We continue in the GPAC. Why not? Mount Marty, 2-4. Jamestown, 1-4 on the season. Jamestown 2-0 in this series all time, won 23-20 last year. And Jamestown picked up its first win of the season last week. It was a 10-7 victory. It was a slugfest. First win of the season over Doane, by the way. Mount Marty looked like it was going to pull the upset last week against Dakota Wesleyan. Too much Jamin Aaron. Seriously, just too much Jamin Aaron last week. 51-45, double overtime loss to Dakota Wesleyan. And the Tigers now 5-1 on the season. Jamestown trying to make it 3-0 in the series and get back-to-back wins. Stay in the GPAC. Let's go ahead and do that. Hastings at Northwestern. Hastings 3-3 on the year. Northwestern 5-0 on the year. And the Red Raiders are 25-10 all time in this series. They've won 16 straight in the series. Well, Northwestern, not only those 16 straight, they've won 18 straight overall. The Red Raiders are on a roll right now. Northwestern won 41-10 in 2022. Now, Hastings lost to Dordt last week. We talked about this. But we stay with the Red Raiders for just a moment. It's going to be a red out for homecoming. So if you are planning on going up to Orange City to watch this game, wear red. And here's another big thing. This is actually pretty cool. They're honoring the 1973 and 1983 national championships teams at Northwestern for homecoming, and rightfully so. 40 years ago, a national championship, that's a good round number. 50 years ago, that's a good round number as well. Northwestern, we mentioned, has won 18 straight, putting up 489.8 yards per game of total offense. And Jalen Gramstead, here's one more Northwestern bit. And I know there's a lot of Red Raider stats here, but sometimes when you're able to get more stats earlier in the week, that's why we're able to give a few more out here. Jalen Gramstead is 293.2 passing yards per game. That's what he has. That's fifth in the NAIA. And we're seeing him pass the ball more, tied for second in the country as well with passing touchdowns. He's had 12 of those. Gramstad, we know, is mobile. Last year had 20-plus passing touchdowns, 20-plus rushing touchdowns. He hadn't had to run the ball as much this year, and we're seeing what he can do when he passes the ball as well. And really all that does, it should sound the alarm for anyone that Northwestern's going to play this year, and I'm talking regular season or playoffs, because if Gramstad, he's healthy, he's doing everything he can, doesn't have to run the ball, we know he can when he does. That's going to be something to watch for the Red Raiders. Hastings on the road at Northwestern for homecoming in Orange City. Cumberland's taking on Cumberland. University of the Cumberland's taking on Cumberland. The Patriots at the Phoenix in this one. Cumberland's 4-1 on the year, 15-11 all-time in this series, and won 10-6 last year. University of the Cumberland's lost to Bethel last week, 30-10. We've talked about that. Cumberland lost to Campbellsville, 34-16. Let's go back to the GPAC one more time here and talk about those Stangs. That's right, roll Stangs. It is homecoming in Sioux City. Another homecoming to mention. Knew we were going to talk about that just briefly. Morningside 5-0 over Concordia in this series all time. The Bulldogs 2-3 on the year. Concordia 5-0. Morningside in this series is 20-1. The records that Morningside has over their opponents in the GPAC, it's just phenomenal, the history that Morningside has been able to do. And Coach Steve Ryan, in his 20-plus years there as the head coach, has just put together such a fantastic program. And we know it's well documented. We've talked about it here on Midwest Sports Net time and again. The 3 national championships in the 4-year stretch, of course, 3 and 5 years now, if you want to go to talk about last season as well. Morningside just continues to dominate. 55-18 winners over Concordia last year. You have to go back 20 years. Here's that number again. There's another round number. How about that to go with the other round numbers tonight? 20 years, you go back to Concordia's last win over Morningside, a 34-19 victory in 2003. I was in my early 30s. There we go. Had only 2 of the 5 kids at that point in 2000. Yeah, I had only 2 of the 5 McWilliams children at that point in time. Concordia defeated Briarcliff 35-23 last week. Morningside defeated Doane 38-7. Morningside has 5 defensive touchdowns. Now, I like talking about Zach Norton, and I'm pretty sure that Dale appreciates that as well. But I did want to mention this: 5 defensive touchdowns. That's tops in the NAIA. Morningside, in recent years, the offense has been flashy, and with the great quarterbacks, the great receivers that they've had, the connections that we've been able to watch, at least from a distance. I've watched it from a distance. I've watched it on the internet and seen some of these fantastic connections. I don't think the Mustang defense really gets the attention that it deserves, because it's a defense that just, week after week shuts opponents down. 5 defensive touchdowns. Again, we mentioned that's tops in the NAIA. And now here's this big number again: 72 consecutive regular season wins. They're going to do it in homecoming. Okay, are we picking? We're going to go with the trend right here. The trend says Morningside will win this one 20 out of 21 times they've done it before. The trend says Morningside's going to win because they've won 72 consecutive regular season games and a number of homecomings in there as well. we're going with the trend in this one and say Morningside's going to come out 6-0. And we'll see. By the way, who's gonna start at quarterback? And Dale, that's actually an interesting question because the quarterbacks with Cash and Lennox, back and forth there. One's a passing quarterback more often. One's a running quarterback more often. I think we're seeing a lot of different numbers this year. Maybe not the same compilation of numbers from specific players because you're going back and getting a different look all the time. I don't know, though. I think it does help because, with Joe Dolencheck last year, all the numbers he put up, but injured going into the playoffs, and it made a difference in the Mustangs' opportunity when they were in the postseason last year. So, that's the deal right there. It's been different from game to game, and I guess it's what they've needed one way or the other. But I will say this: Coach Ryan is definitely putting himself in a position to where he's going to have a quarterback in the postseason, one way or the other. And the defense really is leading the way this year. Morningside 5-0. Let's go ahead and say we're picking Morningside here on Midwest Sports Net. Let's move out of the GPAC now and go down to the Sooner Athletic Conference, which, according to where we're based here on Midwest Sports Net, maybe a little bit more in my neck of the woods, at least geographically. North American 1-4 on the season. Louisiana Christian 5-0 on the season. I've talked about Northwestern. I've talked about Morningside. And if you've been watching this season, Louisiana Christian is somebody we've talked about here quite a bit, and we're going to keep talking about them here. The Wildcats are continuing to roll. Louisiana Christian defeated Oklahoma Panhandle State last week, 29-17. North American beat Texas College, and the Stallions got their first win of the season. Now, this is a program that has 5 wins in its program history. One of those 5 wins was over Louisiana Christian, a 42-41 victory 2 years ago in 2021. Do we go with the trend in this one, that North American continues its trend, having a winning record over Louisiana Christian? Well, let's see what the numbers say. Louisiana Christian, if you're still listening, Football 45, 42.6 points per game. That's 9th in the NAIA. 505 yards of total offense per game. That's 2nd in the NAIA. 92% in the red zone. 24 of 26 times this season, the Wildcats have scored when they've been in the red zone. 20 touchdowns, 4 field goals. Louisiana Christian, 298.2 rushing yards per game. That's 2nd in the NAIA, and that is behind only Friends, who, by the way, not playing this week, but the Falcons are putting up ridiculous rushing numbers. So, Louisiana Christian's numbers, a very, very respectable 298 yards per game. North American is giving up 177 rushing yards per game. That's 72nd, by the way, in the NAIA. We're going to say Louisiana Christian bucks the trend on this one and evens up this series and takes out North American at home. So if you're watching Football 45, we're going with the Wildcats to go 6-0. We stay in the Sooner Athletic Conference here as Panhandle State's on the road at Langston. And for both these teams, this is the second most often played opponent for each one of them. Langston leads the all-time series 30, 22, and 1, including having won 5 consecutive games in the series, 48-13 the win last year. And Panhandle State lost to Louisiana Christian last week. Langston defeated Sagu last week, 45-21. Langston having won 5 straight, 2-2. They're also won 2 consecutive games this season after starting the year 0-2, still with an opportunity to make some noise in the Sooner Athletic Conference. The Lions need to get a win in this one over Oklahoma Panhandle to stay in a position to possibly get some looks in the postseason. And by the way, with the expanded postseason this year, there are a number of teams. Well, since we're talking Sooner Athletic Conference, let's stay right here. Texas Wesleyan, still undefeated in the Sooner Athletic Conference. And Texas Wesleyan, Louisiana Christian, that's a big matchup coming up very soon. OUAZ, just 1 loss in the Sooner Athletic Conference. Louisiana Christian with no losses in the Sooner Athletic Conference. And Langston loss outside of the Sooner Athletic Conference. So you're talking about 4 teams now that have been putting themselves in a good position in recent years, just not enough playoff spots. I think there could be another team out of the Sooner Athletic Conference other than the conference champs. So we'll see who all that turns out to be. Lots more football to be played, just something to think about. So for your boys there in Louisiana, football 45, they're on a roll right now. We're picking them. Langston, we're picking them over Oklahoma Panhandle as well. Staying in the Sooner Athletic Conference, well, these two teams, not as much to talk about playoff-wise anyway. Sagu 1-3 on the road this week at Wayland Baptist, playing this one out in Plainview. Somebody's going to get a win in this one. Sagu lost to Langston. Wayland Baptist lost to OUAZ last week. Sagu 7-3 all-time in this series and won 30-0 last year. Let's move out of the Sooner for just a moment. Head back up to the North Star. Dakota State on the road taking on Dickinson State. It has not been Dakota State's season by any stretch of the imagination, and now taking on a team that's won 22 of 24 all-time in the series, including a 27-7 victory last year. Dickinson State 4-1, 4 straight since losing in the season opener. Dickinson State defeated Valley State last week 34-10. They won 4 straight. By the way, the Blue Hawks have won 12 of their last 14 as well. Braden Zuroff, 110.8 rushing yards per game. That is good enough for 9th in the NAIA. We head a little farther west now. Eastern Oregon picked up its first win of the season last week in a 34-0 shutout of Arizona State. Big win for the Mountaineers. They're taking on Montana State Northern, who has 1 win on the season as well, but that 1 win came back in week 0. So the Lights have lost 3 since then. Eastern Oregon, we mentioned with the win. Northern with the loss to Carroll last week. Eastern Oregon 19-7 all-time in the series, including a 37-0 victory last week. Let's go back to the Sooner Athletic Conference one more time here really quickly. And the rules here say, by the way, I don't know if you're as familiar with all of the rules in college football, but here's one. Somebody has to win this game. It will not end in a tie. They don't let college football games end in ties anymore. Now, I'm old enough to remember ties, and I actually didn't have a problem with a tie. I mean, I know some people say, that's the whole thing like kissing your sister. I didn't have a sister, so I really didn't know. Anyway, that was just bad. I don't know that I like the ties. I thought they were fine, but you can't end in a tie, and that means somebody has to win this game. Texas College close against North American last week, 30-26. Arkansas Baptist lost to Texas Wesleyan, 62-0. Texas College is giving up 46.3 points per game. That's 89th in the NAIA out of 94 teams. Arkansas Baptist is giving up 47 points per game. That's 90th out of 94 NAIA teams. And it's not just that, but there's some undisciplined ball played as well. Arkansas Baptist has been penalized 9.5 times per game, 86th in the NAIA. Texas College has been penalized 12.3 times per game. That is 93, again, out of 94 teams in the NAIA. So somebody has to win this game. It's the second meeting all time between these two programs. Arkansas Baptist won 21-12 back in 2022. And by the way, that was Arkansas Baptist's only win last season as well. So we'll see how this one turns out. We're not going to pick this one. Not going to pick this one. Montana Western and Montana Tech, each team with 1 loss on the season. And we talk about, that last game was the second meeting all time between those two programs. Not the case in this one. The 111th meeting between these two teams. And you want to talk about a very, very tight series. That's exactly what this is. Montana Western leads the all-time series 55-54-1. There's that tie. Split last season with Montana Tech winning 33-24. Montana Western winning 27-21. They played each other twice in the season. Montana Western defeated Southern Oregon last week. Had to come from behind to do it. 24-23. 467.3 yards of total offense for the Bulldogs. That's good enough for 7th in the NAIA. And here are 2 quarterbacks. You want to talk about numbers that are very, very close. It's not only the series that's close, But these two quarterbacks' numbers are so close, they're actually tied. 280.5 passing yards for both Michael Palandri for the Bulldogs and for Blake Thielen for the Ore Diggers. Tied for 7th in the NAI in that stat. Palandri with 12 passing touchdowns on the year. Thielen with 10 passing touchdowns on the year. 11.0. By the way, this is a big stat. Blake Thielen is throwing at 11.0 yards per attempt. Every time he throws the ball, they average a first down. Pretty good numbers. I think it's as evenly matched as just about anything on the board. And we talked about some top 5 games. This is one of the top 5 games of the weekend. Montana Western on the road at Montana Tech. If you have a chance to watch this one. By the way, I have seen a Montana Tech broadcast this year on YouTube, and it is a solid broadcast. So listen to the guys up there on the call there. If the Ore Diggers are broadcasting this one on YouTube and you get a chance to watch it, but this could be the one, Jake. So you said you wanted to watch some other conferences. So Jake Redcorn, this could be the one. Watch this one if you get the chance. I'm going to try to as well. Southern Oregon at Rocky Mountain. Another Frontier Conference game. As we stay here in the Frontier, Southern Oregon 1-3 on the year, Rocky Mountain 3-2. Southern Oregon 7-4 all time in the series. Rocky Mountain, though, won 27-10 last year. Both these teams are good in the red zone. Southern Oregon probably as good as anyone in the country. 100% in the red zone. 13 for 13, scored 10 touchdowns and 3 field goals. Rocky Mountain, 15 for 16 in the red zone, just 95%, a very respectable 95%. 10 touchdowns as well, 5 field goals there. Joseph Dwyer coming off a strong game last week. Even in the loss to College of Idaho, the defense gave up more rushing yards than it had been used to giving up. So we'll see what happens if they can try to shut down Southern Oregon in that run game once again. Here is another one of those undefeated teams, and we're looking at Indiana Wesleyan right now. Coach Rohde still undefeated at the helm at Indiana Wesleyan, taking on a rival in Taylor. The Wildcats 5-0. The Trojans 1-4. Indiana Wesleyan 3-2 all-time in this series. That includes a 61-20 win last year. Indiana Wesleyan won over Siena Heights last week, 48-12. They've won 14 consecutive regular season games. Giving up only 14 points a game, by the way. There's that 14 number again. That's 6th in the NAI. And leading the way in combined takeaways. Indiana Wesleyan with 14 interceptions this year, 5 fumble recoveries. Levi Tidwell for the Wildcats, coming off record-setting performances for IWU in back-to-back games. Is he going to do it a third time? We'll see. Xander Stokes has found a way to get him the ball. Just big-time numbers for Tidwell. Stokes to Tidwell. Stokes, by the way, 63.3% passing completion on the year, 14 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. One thing to Taylor's credit, the Trojans have been penalized only 3.4 times per game. That is second in all of the NAI. Here's another one of those top 5 games. This is a really, really big-time game. And these are two teams that neither one can afford to have a loss. Now, St. Thomas has already had its must-win game 2 weeks ago against Texas Wesleyan, went on the road out to Fort Worth and picked up a huge win in intersectional play. It was out-of-conference play. Can St. Thomas do it again against the defending national runners-up? St. Thomas 3-2, Kaiser 2-2. Neither one of these teams need another loss going in a little bit further into Sun Conference play. St. Thomas, a win over Weber International last week, 41-16. Kaiser defeated Thomas last week, 44-12, similar scores. I want to say similar opponents right there too. St. Thomas led by Rontavious Farmer, 133 rushing yards per game. That's second in the NAI. 10 rushing touchdowns. That's tied for second in the NAI. Kaiser led on the ground by Jaden Meisinger, 87.8 rushing yards per game. That's only 26th in the NAIA, but we know what Meisinger can do. And he has 8 rushing touchdowns as well. That's tied for 5th in the NAIA. This is where St. Thomas's defense is going to have to step up, try to keep Meisinger in check as well as they can. But it's a defense that's found its way into the backfield. 18 sacks on the year for the Bobcats on defense. That's tied for third in the NAIA. So we'll see. Here is the trend. Kaiser, 4-0 all-time in this series. Won 36-31 in 2022. Do we go with the trend in this one? St. Thomas needs the win. Both teams, 2 losses on the season. And we're going to go with the trend on this one. Kaiser wins because the Seahawks are playing at home. We'll say that. How about that? All right, we move on along right now. That's one of the top 5 games. Got to watch that one. If you have a chance to pick that one up, definitely do that. Concordia at Lawrence Tech. The Cardinals 4-0 on the year. I think an underrated Concordia team may not get all the national attention that it deserves, and you'll see it show up here on our screen right about there. Number 15 in the country, according to the NAIA F-ball poll. So we're giving the Cardinals some national recognition. Concordia 3-0 all-time in this series, won 44-21 last year. And Concordia led by Gavin Brooks, 285.8 passing yards per game, 6th in the NAIA, 12 passing touchdowns as well. Concordia has won 7 consecutive games overall. So, something to think about there. Campbellsville, 3-2 on the year. Faulkner, 1-3 on the year. Faulkner, 6-3 all-time in the series, won 3 straight in the series. Campbellsville, led by Jagger Gillis, one of 4 quarterbacks in the NAIA who is throwing at a pace of 300-plus yards per game, just barely over 300.2 yards per game. 4th in the NAIA. Campbellsville has won 3 straight. Faulkner, 6-3 all-time in the series. They've won 3 straight in the series. Which trend do we take in this one? We're going to go with Jagger Gillis and Campbellsville in this one to stop the Eagles' streak overall in the series and to give the Tigers a win in this one. That's the streak we're going with. All right, let's go on here. And St. Francis at Roosevelt. The Lakers on the farewell to the NAIA tour this year. 3-2 right now. St. Francis 6-4 all-time in this series. Won 19-3 last year. Lost a heartbreaker last week to St. Xavier. Shut down by the Cougars defense. Sam Tumulty, however, 88.8 rushing yards per game. He's the QB, and he's still in the top 25 in the country in rushing yards. Has 8 rushing touchdowns as well. Tyler Tenner, a little bit better stats. He's the featured running back for the Lakers. He's number 3 in the NAIA, picking up 128 yards per game. He also has the same amount of rushing touchdowns, though. So 2 big names trying to move the ball on the ground. What's going to make the difference? We're going to go ahead and give it to St. Francis in this one on the road. The Fighting Saints have been giving up only 10.8 yards or points per game. That is 3rd in the NAIA. So just that score right there and what the Saints can do, the Saints can do on defense, we're going to say go with that trend. Go with St. Francis, 4-1, moves to 5-1 on the year. One more game, and we have to go, well, pretty much – back. Let's go out west again. College of Idaho, Frontier Conference game here. Arizona Christian back at home. 2nd ever home Frontier Conference game. Introduced on the road, very rudely, by the way, to Eastern Oregon last week with that shutout. And you know that Tyler Duncan and the Firestorm definitely want to put points on the board at home before a very appreciative crowd there to come watch ACU. Well, they're bringing in the team that was picked to take the Frontier Conference in 2023. College of Idaho 4-1 hasn't shown anything other than that. So try to stop that Coyote offense if they can. College of Idaho defeated Rocky Mountain last week 45-21. And John Schofield doing his part. He's putting up 14.4 points per game. Had a big week last week, and it's a very balanced attack. He has 7 rushing touchdowns, 5 receiving touchdowns. By the way, it's 14, that's easy for me to say, right? 14.4 points per game, 2nd in the NAIA. First ever meeting between College of Idaho and Arizona Christian. And I'll tell you what, since it's our last game of the day, we'll go ahead and pick this one. We're going with College of Idaho in this one. The team picked to win the conference. They've been on a roll so far. Arizona Christian, not an easy place to play or a team to play on the road. We'll go with College of Idaho in this one. 32 games. That's all that's on the docket this week. The KCAC taking the week off in between the crossover divisional play and the divisional play. Same thing for the Hart Conference, taking the week off, had 5 or 6 games in crossover play, taking the week off, 5 more games in divisional play. And by the way, this is where it starts to become very interesting in these conferences. We're into the midpoint. I would say this week really is the midpoint, and definitely week 6 is, middle point between 1 and 11 right there. But it starts to get interesting from this week on because playoff spots really are on the line. The St. Thomas Kaiser game, that is absolutely huge. That's one of the biggest games on the docket. You look through there, the Georgetown Bethel game, where Georgetown really doesn't need to have another loss. Bethel just proving it's on a roll and continuing on through. That's a statement game. Last year was a statement game for Bethel. It could be a statement game again this year. Northwestern and Morningside, both undefeated, just continuing to roll on through. But that St. Thomas game, that's about as big as any. And then, of course, the Montana Western, Montana Tech game, because one of those teams is going to stay at just 1 loss on the year. And it's a big game in the Frontier Conference. All right, we're going to wrap up here. I want to say thanks to everybody for watching tonight. We will be back on Sunday night to talk about the top 5, and that'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and you can just do the math from there on down. We'll be live again. Shout out to everybody for watching. Thanks a whole lot. Football 45, appreciate that. Dale, as well as Jake and Alexander, everyone watching tonight from wherever you watched around the country. East Wichita, Sioux Falls, Park City, Utah. I think that's the first time we've had a Park City, Utah on. Thank you very much for watching. And just feel free to be a part of the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet already, please do that and continue to watch the videos. And we have, like I mentioned a little bit earlier now, we're having memberships and opportunities to be a part of the broadcast in other ways as well. So just want to give that shout out to you guys tonight and say thank you. It means a lot. It's enjoyable to get to visit with you all every week. All right. We are less than 50 minutes on tonight's show. That's because there were about 13 or 14 less games to talk about. So, we'll talk about more, I'm sure, as we go along. That's more opportunities for other teams along the way. Alexander, thanks for watching all the way through. We'll get that to come up there too. Thanks a whole lot for being part of the show tonight. So God bless you all. We do have some more interviews coming up. The summit is coming back for sure on Monday, and we'll get to start talking with some more folks in volleyball and football once again as we continue to roll on Midwest Sportsnet. God bless you all. Have a great, great night. Thanks for watching, and if not before then, we will see you on Sunday night.